Can everybody see that?
We can. Very good, John.
All right, so gonna get going here. So what are we going to talk about today? Obviously, what I said in my opening, Rhode Island opening up phase 1 starting tomorrow, May 9th. Then we're going to talk about what's your plan for you and your business, some planning resources, something that's very important during this time, employee safety. And then we're going to talk about some COVID-19 resources that are available to the business community. And then talk a little bit about remote employee considerations, and then open it up for any questions and answers that folks may have. So this is who you will be hearing from today, and who, if you're watching on your screen, should be seeing, which is myself, John Bielek, Sinclair Risk and Financial Management, Nathan Daniel, VP of Safety and Risk Management Department, Sinclair Risk and Financial Management, and the man who needs no introduction, the celebrity of Rhode Island, Chris Maxwell, President, Rhode Island Trucking Association, my friend, my colleague, new grandfather, Chris Maxwell. I'm turning it over to you, bud.
Thank you, John. Thank you for everyone that's participating. Also to Dave Sinclair for the partnership that we have. Again, Sinclair is not just an insurance company. I partner with them because of this very type of event today, their loss control support and the expertise that folks like Nate bring to the table. So thank you guys for this. Today, none of what we're going to be talking about is an exact science. These are uncharted waters. On scale, there's no one size fits all, because all facilities are unique. But on scale, I think what we're trying to bring out today in phase 1 is the fact there is no exact science, but like many things in business, this is to prevent further outbreak, to prevent sickness with employees, prevent complaints from the outside, from your own employees, from customers in the case of retail, or folks that may be coming into a warehouse facility, and contractors. Most of this is common sense and good faith. We are all, it's now after 6 weeks or so, it's all in our DNA to, not shake hands, not to social distance of 6 feet, it's something now that unfortunately, but fortunately, is in our genetic makeup on what we need to do. So as we go into phase 1 of this business reopening, there are really 2 facets of that, which is really the business side, which we're talking more about today, but intertwined in that is the personal side, which is our personal social distancing, cleanliness, all those things. And we're going to talk about the business side today, as we are a business association, and Sinclair is a commercial insurer. But obviously, the personal side of that plays into this. We need to be aware of our social distancing, which is again something we all know about. That remains at 6 feet. One miscommunication, and I'm not on our slide here, is that social gatherings will be limited to 10 people or less. That was supposed to be the case, but that has been retracted. It still remains at 5 people. Again, how does that play into business? Well, whether it's social gatherings or really in businesses and warehouses and things like that, I think there's some crossover in terms of social distancing that's gonna be into play here. So it is still at 5 people, not 10. We'll talk a little bit about retail. Phase 1 per the slide is that non-critical storefront reopens. There's basically an algorithm, a template, a formula that they're deploying, which is 1 person for every 300 square feet, and that would apply whether it's a reception area in your business, in your warehouse, or a walk-in retail facility. Masks, obviously, with face-to-face retail are still a factor. Masks for, in our case, truck drivers going into facilities, certainly not truck drivers behind the wheel, masks are still a mandatory issue. Plus, some are deploying plexiglass glass protections where they're not already in place. That's clearly a thing that is more retail, but again, if it on scale crosses over to your facility, you should deploy that. Line markings, a lot of people are putting line markings separating people 6 feet. Again, to your facility's unique boundaries that may or may not apply. At the end of the day, a lot of this is common sense and good faith. Trucking, I'll go to trucking. Trucking remains essential. For 6 weeks, our industry has been moving and really self-policing and protecting our workers on the front lines on the fly, kind of ticking and tacking through a mosaic of information, some of which is on our website and has been communicated through our coronavirus toolboxes, and we'll continue to do that. In terms of your operations, warehouses, in terms of how it plays out with phase 1, working from home is still the optimum situation. If you can still allow people to stay at home to prevent crowding and that inability to have social distancing, then that is the preferred mode of work. As you have a gradual return of your, hopefully by priority, your more essential people, you obviously will learn more as we get into phase 2 and phase 3, and I think that will kind of just be a natural progression. Obviously, limited facility access is still in play here in terms of contractors or other folks coming in. Again, on the contractor or warehouse or facility side. Cleaning, obviously, again, whether you're using a service or you're self sanitizing, clearly that's something that is in play here. Trucking best practices, the biggest factor, and I'm drawing some of this up from a weekly conference call that I jump on with Commerce Rhode Island. That includes the governor, the Department of Health, and this is probably one of the more important factors that I'm going to bring up today. And don't be intimidated by it, because again, it goes back to what I'm going to say for a third time. It goes back to common sense and good faith, and that is having some sort of plan in place. The phase 1 requires the businesses certify that they met a checklist of requirements, and I think John has a checklist. There are a number of templates flying around. You can even choose to make a simple one that suits your facility. There is no perfect science, perfect template, but John will get into that a little bit later in this. You should have a plan, a checklist. You should also have a plan explaining how requirements of phase 1 will be met. You should have a plan for dealing with an outbreak. That includes, if somebody is sick, sending them home, and a strict policy about people that may feel ill and what they need to. And obviously that plays into your personnel and your leave policies. You should have that written checklist and policy at your facility, hanging on a wall somewhere, visible, and maybe it is incorporated into your personnel policy. I'm going to go back for the 4th time to my point that I opened with. There's not going to be this is going to be loose enforcement. And right from the Commerce Secretary's mouth was, they're not going to be out there knocking on doors, doing inspections. They don't have the capacity to do it. And again, I don't think there's a scale or a template that they could go out and enforce by. All of this is I want to say voluntary, it's mandatory, but it's based on your good faith and best practices. Loose enforcement to no enforcement. What will trigger enforcement is some sort of outbreak that emanates from your facility or your workplace, an employee complaint, a customer complaint, a contractor complaint, or somebody from outside. If you are doing the right things, you shouldn't have those things, and if you do have those things and you're doing the right things, then you shouldn't be wary or concerned about some sort of outside enforcement, fine, or inspection. It's not, right from Commerce Secretary Pryor's mouth, this is not going to be, they're not out there to crack down on people. So that said, there is a reopen number that the state has provided. That is 521 HELP. There's an abundance of resources that we keep popping out via our COVID-19 toolboxes. And on that note, I think I will turn it back over to John for his portion, and I'll come back in as needed. John, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. For everybody on the call, I look forward to spending the next 2 hours with you. Chris did an excellent job of speaking. We found these bullet points in the link to the article here. I know you're unable to click on it because I'm sharing my screen with you, but all links we share, we will make sure Chris and Monique have available. Again, we are recording this presentation, so if there's anything in here that you want to follow up with us on, our contact information will be available at the end, okay? So, one of the most important things that Chris brought up is, what's your plan? What's your plan to reopen? I would hope by now, into week 8, you have a loose coronavirus action plan. You'll see a sample here on the right of a general industry action plan. But kind of put some bullet points here of reopening considerations and what you should be looking at in your reopening plan. And I'm going to get to the Sinclair website. To Chris's point, there's a lot of resources available to you, and I think a lot of us have been drinking from a fire hose. I know Chris has done a really good job with his daily briefing of trying to capture what's important and filter out all the nonsense. Sinclair team has done the exact same thing, and we've actually recently created a section on our website dedicated to COVID-19 resources. So in a little while, I'm going to show you some examples, and that's why I'm not going to talk too long about the reopening plan, but things you all want to consider as you are setting your plan for your specific operations. And then lastly, you'll hear me say this a few times, but Chris and Monique are available for help. Sinclair's here for help. We're only a phone call or an email away, so please don't think you're in this alone as you're staring up Mount Everest here in terms of what do I do. So with that being said, as you're planning your plan, and Chris mentioned this before, we're big believers in checklists at Sinclair. We've actually spent the past 2 weeks developing a specific checklist for our clients that I'll show you here in a little bit. But more things that you want to put on your checklist. And when I show you the checklist, you're going to see some items that you say, duh, no kidding. But I'll give you an example. Have you thought about the distance in your break room of chairs? Well, that's something that would be good to put pen to paper on a checklist. Just make sure that you're getting all the small things in addition to the big items, because obviously the most important thing is keeping you and your employees safe and your company productive as can be in this disruption. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nathan Daniel, and I put 3 important questions here that Nathan has been handling on a frequent basis from our clients and our partners. And so with that, Nate, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. So employee safety, as Chris and John have indicated, is of the utmost importance. And as you start to reopen, there are some things that we need to consider. So before I discuss the points listed there, I just want to give a pause to think about the fact that as we reopen, there are some considerations that sometimes get missed. For the example that as businesses, you have been operating as truckers nonstop because you're essential. But other businesses that have been closed, as they start to reopen, the potential for exposure increases as more people are moving in and out of businesses that have been closed. So as you make deliveries to places that were previously closed up, now you have this potential where you have employees that are coming from homes where there could potentially be sick people or have people they've been in close proximity to that are now coming into the workforce. And you're now depending on that company to introduce a reopening plan and to be very cautious with their plan. But if they're not, then your plan needs to make up the difference for what they may be shortcoming on. So give consideration, though some of this stuff is very evident and very easy and common sense, but you're also having to consider the fact that you're working in conjunction with other businesses that may not take it as serious as you, because as Chris has indicated, will be either soft enforcement or no enforcement. So with that being said, you may have some employers that say, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do it at the level that the governor has asked us to. Therefore, that may impact what happens when your employees go forward into that organization to make a stop or a delivery or have interaction with them. So going back to the safety measures that you put in place, that checklist or plan that was talked about earlier becomes a really critical piece, not only internally to your business, but externally as you're out in the field. So as I reopen, then it says, okay, so I've got to make a stop. So we know that we have to wear the mask. So we're required to wear the mask per the governor in or out. So if you're outside, you have to wear it. If you're inside, you have to wear it. So, okay, that's fine. How are we going to provide masks? Where are we going to get them? You know, you can use bandanas or other objects. The CDC has given a lot of information on that. So I'm not going to spend time on that other than the fact that they are required. And so at this point, I assume we've all addressed how we get masks. But again, keep in mind that as you provide this mask, now that businesses are reopening, now the influx of people trying to get masks or make masks or retrieve masks now goes up again, which means your supply may decrease. So you may have to find alternative measures internally to make that work. So social distancing is obviously a key component of this process in the re-entering or reopening. And remember, as we talk about safety protocols, a lot of this revolves around the fact that we're trying to isolate or control where the virus is at. So as businesses inadvertently open and potentially bring the virus into their facility, we are introducing each safety measure to hopefully put a barrier both physically and not physically in between you and the virus, understanding that a mask made of a bandana won't physically stop the virus, but it stops overspray, which may contain the virus. The plexiglass partitions that really don't apply to you may actually apply in the sense that if you're making a delivery and you can't get the social distancing and the mask may not be sufficient, that's where those plastic barriers then become a critical piece to keep things from flowing from one side to the next. So at the end of the day, as we get in and out of our trucks, what is our protocol for sanitizing trucks? If I'm exposing in the reopening to a facility that isn't cleaning properly, when I exit that facility and I get into my vehicle, how do I clean myself and my vehicle to make sure that I did not inadvertently spread that virus within my own vehicle? And then remember that the virus will live on certain products for a certain amount of time. So certain metals, it'll only live for a few hours. For cardboard, it could be up to 96 hours. In plastics and steel and other things, it could be up to 72 hours. So there are generalized time frames that the virus will live. So as we reopen and we start engaging more with clients and we start engaging and touching more things, door handles, opening and closing things, now your exposure is going to increase. I go to a customer and I make a delivery and I use their bathroom, that now may increase my exposure. So give some consideration to this. So if I've got that kind of thought through and I've done my checklist and I've done my social distancing and I've got my mask and I've thought through this, now the question is, all right, what happens if they become in close proximity of somebody else that has the coronavirus? What happens when they start showing symptoms? The governor's made it very clear that if any symptoms, regardless of type, they are to go home. No questions. They're to go home. Now that comes back to how did you set up the self-screening though? Chris talked about that. As your employees come in, what does your screening process look like? For some of you, it could be very small. For some of you, your screening could be very large, depending on how your business operates and what you need out of it. So at any point, though, during that screening process, an employee is identified as having symptoms of some sort, the fever or any of the other listed symptoms, they're going home. And then the question is, how do I deal with that? Were they in close proximity to other people that I need to now isolate and also send home? So as you develop your plan, part of that is to figure out, what do I do if an employee does get sick now during the reopening, and what is my protocol going back to 48 hours previously to find out who they've been in, the contact tracing to figure out who they've been in contact with, so that I can now take appropriate measures to move forward to eliminate that exposure. So that's really important that you walk through this, because what we're finding across many states that we've had interactions with is that as people do this and the exposure potential goes up, because we're obviously as we increase the volume of people that we can be around and we increase what businesses are open, what we're finding is that there is a issue with employees that are now getting the coronavirus, because it may not just be one employee, it's 1, 2. So as an example, I had a company this morning that had 2 in the same day get tested and shown for coronavirus at the same company. So haven't seen a lot of that, but we are seeing more of that come into play, where more than one person in a single company is getting sick. So it's something to give consideration to, because remember, as we reopen and other family members are going out back into the field to work, they also have an increased exposure. They bring back home to the home front, the house, which then the exposure then brings it to you. So you may not necessarily get it from your job. You may see it from just your general household living, because you now have a greater exposure from the household going back out into public. So give some thought to how you're going to address that internally as a company, what the protocols are. So I send them home for the quarantine for the 14 days. What does that look like? How do I give my employee resources? What is the process? How does that integrate with my leave? How does that integrate with the new leave processes that the government has put in place? And how do those correlate together? Then what happens when we're seeing this as well, when I have an employee that is physically too scared to come back to work? And we are seeing some of this. You have already been working, obviously, so I suspect at this point you probably already addressed this issue, but maybe you haven't. And you will see some of this where employees are generally saying, I'm too afraid to come back to work. Well, as a general perspective, and this is not a be-all, end-all, but OSHA has what's called an imminent danger clause, which basically says if there's a reason for them not to come back that's an imminent danger, then they have the right not to come back. But since you are taking proactive measures and taking certain safety protocols in place, imminent danger in almost every instance does not apply. So outside of OSHA, then you have, are there ADA issues, or are there age issues? Are there compromised immune systems? There could be. And in those instances, you'll address those on a case-by-case basis. But as a generalized fear, I don't want to come back to work without a specific reason, i.e. the ADA or a age issue or a compromised immune system or some other means that's allowed to push off to stay home longer, then they need to come back to work. But remember, take into consideration, though, that the governor has said that if you have people in your organization that can telecommute, meaning working from home, you are asked to do that. So if you can telecommute and you're saying, no, I need them back in the office, that's not the same. That's a different scenario. You're supposed to remain telecommute if that is a possibility for you. But if that's not a possibility and they have to come back as an essential employee, you have some that are already working, but you may have others that are not in that category. You're going to start bringing them back into the office. Then in that case, when there's a generalized fear, remember that they do need to return, but please be sensitive to that, because we are in a pandemic. Not everybody's comfortable. So again, this is where, have you asked your employees about what their concerns are? Have you got the protocols in place to address them? Have you made those known to your employees, what you're doing to address those? How are you going to maintain social distancing? Are you putting markings down on the floor? What screens are you putting up? How are you addressing the communal places? Water coolers, coffee machines, Because the generalized fear is that I don't want to end up coming back to work and end up getting sick if I've worked so hard for many weeks not to get sick. So having a way to kind of determine where employees are with that thought process and how to bring them back in a way that makes them comfortable is an important process. But at any stage of the game, as you do your plans and you do your surveys and you do your checklist, you want to communicate that back to the employees in some fashion. And please understand, you want to be careful how you communicate back, because if you're not, then you can sometimes do harm. But you do want to communicate with them in a appropriate way for you that allows them to feel comfortable with what not only your plan is and what the future plan looks like. Because as Chris has indicated, this is common sense, but even as common sense, some of the stuff is still vague, it's undefined, and so employees get uncomfortable when things are not laid out in a very simplistic manner that they can understand. So making sure that you may have a great grasp of this, but they may not have the same understanding, and we're trying to get them to a level that they're comfortable. But at the same point, we need them to take it seriously, because as we reenter, as I've discussed, the exposure goes up. They're going to have more exposure, not only at home. So how are they taking what we're teaching them at the office, and how are we pushing that back down to their home life? Meaning, how do people sanitize at their home when they're in closer proximity? As people come back from work in the evening, how are they cleaning before they go in the house? How are they making sure they are doing what they need to do with safety or the protocols? How are we issuing with the face mask? If we're doing cloth face masks, what are the cleaning protocols? Are you asking them to wash? Are there any system to that thought of how we're going to ensure that the mask got clean, so that when they come back the next day with a mask, it's not the same mask they had on that was dirty for 4 days, because then that's not going to meet the requirement. But again, the requirement just says I have to wear a mask, but there's no thought to the sanitation of the mask. So I think I've gotten way off task as far as going through this, but that's the generalized idea, is that take what you understand as it is and just walk through in your mind the exposures. That's why those checklists and plans become critical. So feel free to ask questions or at the end, or send an email to us, or certainly can open up a chat if you have questions or wish to expand on this. Otherwise, I'm going to turn this back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Two
John,
things.
John, can I make a quick comment?
Yep, go ahead, Chris.
Just I could leave it till the end, but I think it's appropriate now. And this is something that it isn't in the plan, but it's something that I think every employer needs to be looking at, and it goes to what the governor and most people have been asking people to do, which is keep a log of those that they come in contact with. And that really, if employers and workplaces can limit those people that work and are exposed to one another on a daily basis, it'll be much easier to track. Let me give you an example. I got a call earlier in the game, about a month or so ago, from a construction company that was deemed essential, and they said, "Hey, we've got the crew traveling to and from the job in a crew cab, and I don't even know. I'm not even going to say it whether it was legal or not in terms of social distancing, but crew cab is large enough that if four laborers were in it, they could distance away from each other on the bench seat." My point to him was, you should not commingle, or in this case, co-contaminate the crews. In other words, if Manny, Joe, Steve, and Larry have been working together and commuting together, keep them together. And this can translate over to workplaces as well. The less you cross-contaminate people, the less exposure each has, and the less you have to go back and retrace who was in contact with who. So just a point there that I think many can apply to their workplaces.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nathan. 2 comments on Nathan's section. Number 1, thank God we recorded all that. And number 2, I think Nathan shows that safety is not a job, it's a passion. And he is dedicated to his mission of keeping your employees safe. So thank you both. So with that being said, I'm going to take a break from our PowerPoint here, and I'm going to show you some resources. I would highly encourage anybody who's on the call today to visit Sinclair's COVID website, which is the link right here. Again, we will send out the links after this presentation, but this one's pretty simple for you to be able to write down right now, and I'm going to show you why. So here is Sinclair's COVID page, and as you'll see here, is there's a lot of different. Can you see it, Chris?
Hey, John, you need to share.
Yes.
You need to share the page. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you guys see that now?
Yep.
All right, so you'll see here there's a lot on this page, and what we've tried to do is keep everything organized in different sections, and every section has these blue boxes. Well, these blue boxes, if you click on them, have more resources available. So since we're talking about restarting businesses, and I mentioned to you reopening plans, I'm going to click on this one right here. So here's considerations. Here's return to work plan. And I'm going to open up this so that you can all see the return to work plan here. So I told you we're going to give you some freebies. Here's one right here. So all you need to go to see this is go to the Sinclair website. And this is a 10-page document that maps out a lot of what you saw in the bullet points of what you should be considering in making your return to work plan if you haven't already. So I'm not going to take the time to go through this with you today. I think you all can do that on your own. Again, I'd encourage you, once you start looking at this, if you have questions, concerns, need help, reach out to us. But again, Sinclair's website, we've been spending the last 8 weeks pushing out resources to our clients, and we want to make sure that those resources are able to be utilized for you. The second thing I'm going to share with you right now is I mentioned before that we put together a checklist for our clients, and every business is unique, so every business has their own. But as you're putting together your checklist, I would encourage you to think of it in phases, like this spreadsheet right here. So when this goes through, again, a lot of what you should be thinking about, and maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but sit down, put pen to paper, and go through your operation. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading this verbatim, but you can see it's pretty extensive. I mean, we're going down over probably close to 200 lines of considerations that we felt would come into play for most businesses. And then again, you can add your own custom sections. So as you're making checklists, come up with something like this. If you have questions, you want to pick our brain on making your checklist, please give us a call or an email. All right, with that, I'm going to do a new share here. Back to our PowerPoint. Everybody see that?
Yep.
All right. So we've shared some resources. We've shared some ideas. One other thing that I want to point out, because it's happening live time, for those businesses that have sent their office employees home, or businesses that have sent everybody home, cyber criminals have taken notice. And these are just some headlines. Last night when I was finalizing the presentation, I went online and I Googled cybercrime coronavirus, and these are 3 that popped up. So we are noticing as an organization, not only externally, but even ourselves at Sinclair, that we're getting fraudulent emails every single day from Dave Sinclair, from John Killistrand. I got one from Nathan the other day asking me to click links that were harmful to our system. So something if you have not thought about, something you need to think about if you have employees working from home, and knowing your employees are scared and stressed out, they are most likely not thinking 100% clearly, and therefore could very easily fall victim to one of these types of cyber crimes mentioned. There's a lot here in terms of tips of preventing cyber attacks. I think the most important thing is what's bolded in the upper left-hand corner of training your employees on how to detect and respond to phishing attacks. So communicate, 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 right? That's, I think, something we're all learning through this process. Communication is key. Train your employees. If you are fortunate enough to work with an IT vendor for your business, reach out to them. Our IT vendors have been fantastic in this process, to the point that they're even running tests on Sinclair employees where they're sending out fake fraudulent emails and seeing who clicks and who doesn't. So some more additional tips preventing cyber attacks. And for those that are concerned about cyber attacks on their business, Sinclair does have a proprietary platform. I called it 10-minute cyber insurance because it is very easy to go on and get a quote. I'm going to click this link here and then start a new share just to show you what it entails.
John, while you do that, can I offer a practical application?
Of course.
So while he shares this, a practical application would be most companies have security systems in play at their own office, but when we send employees home with their laptops, for example, they're using their modems, their routers, and the problem is that most of us being at home don't or have not changed the password on our routers and modems. So the password on standard password on modems and routers is admin. So hackers have no problem driving up in a neighborhood where people are telecommuting, working from home. They know this. They can just start seeing whose password is admin that they didn't change internally. Once they've hacked into their system, they then back into the company system via the virtual networks, because they were able to get in, because the weakest link ended up being the employee's home modem and router, because they never went in to change the security settings. And I think a lot of people fall victim to that without realizing that it becomes the weak link. So John's exactly right in thinking about how we think about setting this stuff up to protect not only the company, but helping our employees understand the ramifications if people can back into it.
So I just wanted to show you very quickly, and the goal here is not to sell you insurance, it's just to provide you an option. Very simple quoting system. 4 stages. For most businesses, once you complete this application, it will send me a bindable quote for your business. Depending on the type of business, coverage is very affordable. So if you are concerned that your employees may be duped by some of these scams, it's not a bad time to pick up some protection. So very simple questionnaire for most businesses. As long as you're not handling protected financial or health information, again, we can get a bindable quote in about 10 minutes. So I'd encourage you all to visit this link. Again, it will be made available to Chris and Monique to share with you. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
John, if I can just endorse, not to mention anybody, but you were very helpful to an insured recently who did not have cyber, and you recommended to that person, and that person took your advice, and it saved them, 6 figures and then some for something they never had before. So it is a different time, and anybody out there, we're looking at it here. I think we have some level, but these are different times, and I just want to endorse the fact that it does work. We've seen it work. I saw it work recently with somebody, and don't discount it. Go ahead,
Thank you, Chris. So we've gone over a lot today. Again, we've recorded this presentation so that we can send it out to you to review. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to unmute everybody for questions and answers, but I want to thank Chris for getting the troops together to do this. Nathan, thank you always for your wisdom and knowledge. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up so I can see the Zoom controls here. And I'm going to unmute everyone. Any questions for anybody on the line? Sorry.
I guess we did a good job.
Okay. Again, I would encourage you all to reach out to us. I will pull this up one more time so that you have mine, Chris's information. Knowing how busy Nathan's been responding to clients' urgent needs, I'm going to protect him. You're going to have to go through me to get to Nathan. So there's my contact information. I gave you my cell phone. There's Chris's information. I know him and Monique are responding to clients in the same manner that we are. So anything we can do to help you. Most importantly, I hope you all stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to sitting at a bar with you at some point down the road and cheersing to this thing being behind us. But thank you again for everyone who participated today. Thank you to Chris and Nate. Be safe.
Thank you, John. Everyone have a good weekend, everyone.